In the middle of our wedding, my mother-in-law burst into the party in a black mourning dress. I thought she was going to ruin our celebration. Turns out she saved me when she showed me. The story I am going to tell is based on fiction and does not reflect real events. Enjoy listening. This morning, I woke up enveloped in the warmth of being a newly married woman, my heart swelling with the promise of a shared future. By 9 p.m. that same evening, I was resolute about filing for divorce, my world turned upside down by revelations that not only shattered my marriage but also dismantled the trust and dreams I had carefully cultivated over the past year. The catalyst for this upheaval was the unexpected arrival of a mysterious woman in a black dress who appeared uninvited at my wedding reception, setting in motion a cascade of truths that would expose the fragile foundation of my carefully planned life. At 6:30 a.m., I rose from bed, my spirit buoyant with anticipation for what I believed would be a flawless day, a celebration to mark the beginning of my new life. The legal formalities of our marriage had been completed the previous day at the registry office, a simple affair with just 2 witnesses and a quick exchange of signatures. That was merely paperwork. Today was meant to be the true celebration, the culmination of 8 months of meticulous planning. I had poured my heart into every detail, from the floral arrangements to the menu, crafting what I thought would be a mosaic of my lifelong happiness. My wedding dress hung elegantly on the wardrobe door, a vision in silky ivory with intricate lace sleeves that reached my elbows. I had chosen it in March, back when I believed I knew the man I was about to marry. As I stood before it in the soft glow of the morning sun filtering through the curtains, a peculiar calm settled over me, as if some unspoken truth had already begun to whisper in my subconscious, hinting that the day might not unfold as I had envisioned. At 9 a.m., Roman arrived at our apartment, his presence as magnetic as ever. When he saw me in my dress, a steaming cup of coffee in my hand, he flashed that disarming smile, the one that had captured my heart a year ago and made me believe in love at first sight. "You're absolutely breathtaking," he said, his eyes gleaming as if I were a rare jewel, his voice carrying that effortless charm that always seemed to know exactly what I needed to hear. Today, he was especially attentive, his gestures tender as he brushed a stray lock of hair from my face, kissed my temple softly, and declared with conviction that I would be the most radiant bride in the entire city. "Did your mom change her mind about coming?" I asked, though I already knew the answer, having heard his stories about her. "Don't worry about her," he replied, turning to gaze out the window, his tone dismissive. "She's a complicated woman, toxic, if I'm being honest. It's better for us that she's not part of our day." My parents had accepted his explanation without hesitation. My father nodded with a knowing look, as if every family harbors its own hidden dramas. My mother, ever empathetic, expressed sorrow for Roman, pitying a man who, in her eyes, had grown up without a mother's love and support. I, too, thought I understood his pain, believing his tales of an estranged, prideful single mother living in modest circumstances. Now I realize I understood nothing at all. By 3 p.m., the restaurant was buzzing with life, filled with the laughter and chatter of our guests. The venue was a vision of elegance, exactly as I had dreamed it. A grand ballroom adorned with crisp white tablecloths, vibrant bouquets of fresh flowers gracing every table, and a string quartet playing soft, melodic tunes in the corner. The atmosphere was warm, festive, alive with the clinking of champagne glasses and heartfelt toasts. Roman held my hand tightly, his thumb brushing over my knuckles as he leaned in to whisper compliments that made my heart flutter. In that moment, I felt like the happiest woman alive, the kind of happiness that comes from believing you've achieved everything you ever wanted: a perfect love, a perfect day, a perfect future. At 4:30 p.m., we stepped onto the dance floor for our first dance as husband and wife. Roman guided me gracefully to a slow, romantic melody, his hands steady and warm, twirling me with a tenderness that felt like a promise. Guests captured the moment on their phones, some wiping away tears of joy, others smiling broadly at the beauty of it all. I was certain, as I looked into his eyes, that this was the beginning of a beautiful life together, a fairy tale unfolding before everyone we loved. Then, the heavy double doors of the ballroom swung open with a soft creak. A woman stood framed in the doorway, dressed in a long, somber black gown that seemed out of place amidst the celebration. A delicate black veil obscured her face, adding an air of mystery to her presence. She stepped forward slowly, her movements deliberate, as if she had every right to be there. The room fell silent in waves, starting with those nearest the entrance, the hush spreading like a ripple until even the quartet's music faltered and stopped. A nervous laugh broke the tension. Someone muttered, "Is this a surprise? Some kind of theatrical act?" But the woman continued her measured approach, heading directly toward our table at the center of the room. Roman's face paled, his grip on my hand tightening until it felt clammy and unsteady. "Who is she?" I asked, my voice low, trying to mask the unease creeping into my chest. He didn't respond, his eyes fixed on the approaching figure. The woman stopped just 2 steps from us and slowly lifted her veil, revealing a stern face marked by deep lines around her eyes, her expression carrying a weight that made my stomach churn. "Congratulations," she said, her voice clear and deliberate, carrying to the farthest corners of the room. "Now we're all one big family." I knew who she was before Roman spoke, his words forced through gritted teeth. "Please, escort her out." "She's not well." The woman didn't flinch. Instead, she pulled out a chair at a nearby table and sat down with an air of quiet authority, her expression almost triumphant, as if she were unveiling a long-hidden truth. "I just wanted to see my son," she said, addressing the entire room, her voice steady and unwavering, "and perhaps to understand where I'll live now, that I no longer have a home." Confusion gripped me, my mind racing to make sense of her words. Roman looked as though he wanted to vanish into the floor, his usual confidence replaced by a visible panic. The guests exchanged awkward glances, unsure whether to intervene or stay silent. The woman reached for a glass of champagne from the table and raised it, her tone cutting like a blade. "To the new family unit," she said, "and to husbands who honor what's been entrusted to them." The room stirred, whispers turning into murmurs. Some guests stood to get a better view, others leaned in to confer with their neighbors. My parents sat frozen at their table, my mother's hand covering her mouth, my father's brow furrowed as he tried to process the scene unfolding before us. "She's mentally unstable," Roman said, his voice louder than necessary, as if trying to convince not just me but the entire room. "Don't listen to her. She's not right in the head." The woman set her glass down carefully and looked at him with a mixture of pity and resignation. "The apartment I lived in for 20 years was in your name," she said, her words measured and deliberate. "You convinced me to sign it over to avoid complications during my divorce from your father. Do you remember? Last Thursday, bailiffs sealed it off because of your debts." My head spun, the room tilting slightly as her words sank in. For months, Roman had spun a story about his mother, a proud, solitary woman living in a dilapidated communal apartment, too stubborn to reconcile with her son. He'd even shown me faded photos of an old building, claiming it was where he grew up, a relic of a difficult childhood. Now, the truth was unraveling like a poorly stitched seam. "He took out a loan against the apartment," she continued, her voice growing firmer, her gaze shifting to include me. "A large sum. Neither I nor you, his bride, were told about it. She's lying, Roman shouted, leaping from his chair, his face flushed with desperation. Mom, stop it. You're not in your right mind. But before he could say more, a man from his side of the guest list stood, a short, balding man in a tailored suit, his eyes sharp and calculating. Roman, you promised to pay me back after the wedding, he said coolly. We had an agreement. Another man rose, his tone equally firm. You owe me too. I've been waiting 6 months. I glanced at Roman's table, where 7 men, all roughly his age, introduced to me as colleagues, old school friends, or gym buddies, sat watching him intently, their expressions a mix of expectation and frustration. 200,000, the first man said, for the restaurant booking. 150, said the second, for the rings and the bouquet. 300, added a third, for the cars and the photographer. The numbers came one after another, each a blow to the illusion I'd been living in. I listened, stunned, as the reality crystallized. Every detail of our wedding, the flowers, the champagne, the very dress I wore, had been funded by money Roman had borrowed from these men, debts he had no intention of repaying on his own. You said it yourself, one of them said, stepping closer, his voice low but piercing. Marry a rich girl, and her family will cover everything once you seal the deal. The silence that followed was suffocating, broken only by the faint ticking of a decorative clock on the wall. I turned to my father, whose face had reddened with barely contained fury. He rose slowly, his presence commanding. So that's why you orchestrated this extravagant spectacle? He said, his voice low and dangerous. You thought we'd foot the bill for your entire charade? Roman's eyes darted frantically, between me, his mother, and the men now circling him like creditors closing in. He searched for words, some new lie to salvage the moment, but his usual charm had deserted him. There was nothing left to say. I stood, my dress rustling softly, as if it were whispering the truth I'd been too blind to see. The room grew quieter, the weight of every gaze settling on me. Roman reached for my hand, trying to pull me aside, away from the prying eyes of our guests, but I remained rooted to the spot. If my life was crumbling, let it happen in full view. Let everyone witness what my dream wedding had become, a stage for betrayal. It's temporary, he stammered, his voice weak and unconvincing even to himself. I just wanted to give us a beautiful day for you. You deserve the best, mi amor. His words, once so enchanting, now sounded hollow, like cheap trinkets masquerading as treasure. Tell her the truth, his mother said, her voice heavy with a weariness that spoke of years of disappointment. Tell her what you did with the money from the apartment, or shall I do it for you? Roman remained silent, his gaze fixed on the floor, the ceiling, the guests, anywhere but on me. His silence was more damning than any confession could have been. He gambles, she said, turning to me, her eyes steady and unflinching. Casinos, sports betting, cryptocurrency schemes. I hoped you might be the one to stop him, to ground him, but instead you became his solution, a way to fix his financial mess. A solution, not a bride, not a partner, but a calculated means to an end. Memories flooded back, late nights when Roman sat hunched over his phone, muttering about numbers, pacing nervously on the balcony with a cigarette in hand. I'm working on investments, he'd say with a confident smile. Crypto is the future, trust me. I know what I'm doing. Now I saw the truth. He had known exactly what he was doing, but it was never what he'd led me to believe. One of his friends pulled out a phone and began scrolling through messages. Want proof? He said, his tone matter-of-fact. Here's what he wrote. It'll all be covered after the wedding. She's a businesswoman with a solid income. Her family will step in right away. The words struck me like a physical blow, sharp and humiliating. His friends had known about me, had discussed my income, my family, my trust, plotting how to exploit my naivety. "He said you were naive," another added, his eyes averted, as if ashamed to deliver the final sting. "That you'd fall for love at first sight without asking too many questions." Naive. That's how the man I planned to spend my life with saw me, a convenient, trusting fool with money and influential parents. The guests sat in stunned silence. Some had begun discreetly filming, their phones capturing every moment of the unfolding drama. By tomorrow, I knew this story would spread across social media, my wedding reduced to a viral cautionary tale or a cruel joke. I walked to the microphone by the MC's station, my steps steady despite the chaos in my heart. My hands didn't tremble. A strange, unshakable calm had settled over me, as if I were finally seeing my life clearly. "Okay," I said, my voice resonating through the silent ballroom. "I want to understand exactly what I've gotten myself into." Every eye was on me. Guests, waiters, even the musicians, who had paused their quiet conversations. I stood in my ivory gown, holding the microphone, and for the first time in months, I spoke my truth without hesitation. "I didn't know any of this until tonight," I began, my gaze sweeping over my parents, my friends, my colleagues. "Roman and I signed the marriage papers yesterday. Legally, I'm his wife. But now I'm learning who he really is." His mother approached me, her steps slow but purposeful, and handed me a plain envelope. Inside were documents, each one a piece of the devastating puzzle: a debt notice, a copy of a loan agreement, a court order for the seizure of property. All were official, stamped, and signed, collected in just 3 days since Thursday. "Loan taken 2 years ago from Renaissance Bank," I read aloud, my voice steady despite the weight of the words. 1,000,000 rubles secured by the apartment. Outstanding balance with interest is 1,600,000. No payments made since last January. The numbers painted a grim picture, each one a brushstroke in a portrait of betrayal. Roman had used his mother's apartment as collateral for a massive loan, stopped making payments over a year ago, and squandered the money on gambling, all while constructing a facade of stability and love with me. "He used you as an alibi," a guest shouted from the back, and the room erupted in murmurs. A man I recognized as one of Roman's friends stood, his voice tinged with frustration. "He owes me 3 months' salary. Said it was temporary, just until the wedding." 50,000, a woman at another table added, her tone bitter. "He borrowed it for a gift for the bride." A gift. I glanced down at the engagement ring on my finger, the one he'd given me a month ago during a romantic proposal by a fountain. I'd thought it was a symbol of his love. Now I knew I'd unknowingly paid for it myself. His mother sat beside me, her face etched with exhaustion, looking older and wearier up close. "I put the apartment in his name 8 years ago," she said quietly, her voice directed only to me. "I thought I was protecting our family's assets during my divorce from his father. He convinced me it was the responsible choice, that he'd never let me down as a son." There was no bitterness in her tone, only the heavy resignation of someone who had realized her mistake far too late. 2 years ago, he took out the loan, claiming it was for a business venture, a temporary measure. I only learned about the debt when bailiffs arrived last Thursday and sealed my home. I found out about your wedding through social media and knew I had to come, to tell you the truth before it was too late. We were both victims of the same man's deception. She had lost her home. I had lost the future I'd envisioned. "You're not the first," she added, her eyes locking with mine, a quiet empathy passing between us. "Before you, there was Anna, another kind, successful woman. They lived together until she uncovered his debts and walked away." Roman stood pressed against the wall, his face ashen, hands trembling visibly. For the first time since we'd met, he looked stripped of his charm, a man cornered with no clever words to save him. He was no longer the confident, charismatic man I'd fallen for, just a frightened figure with no plan. "You thought marrying me would solve everything," I said, my voice steady as I met his gaze. "A roof over your head, a clean slate, paid for by my family's money. But your house of cards collapsed faster than you expected." He tried to respond, his voice weak and pleading. "I just wanted a fresh start, mi amor," he said, the endearment sounding hollow. Things spiraled out of control. I never meant for it to end like this. As if a 1,000,000-ruble loan could be taken out by accident. As if ignoring payments for over a year, deceiving his mother, and manipulating me could be unintentional oversights. "Please forgive me," he begged, stepping toward me, arms outstretched. "We're married now, husband and wife. I should at least have something left from this, something left for him. To him, I wasn't a wife, but a prize, a final lifeline to grasp when all else had slipped away." His mother stood, carefully removing her black veil and folding it with deliberate precision, as if setting aside her grief. Without it, she looked like an ordinary woman, worn down by years of misplaced trust. "You didn't marry her for love," she said to Roman, her voice calm but piercing. "You married out of necessity, and everyone here sees it except you." I looked at him and realized he genuinely couldn't distinguish between love and calculation. To him, they were one and the same. A wife with money was his right, his version of love. "You're not a victim," I said, holding his gaze, my voice unwavering. "You're calculating. You didn't lose your life. You gambled it on me. If you walk away, you'll have nothing." His voice broke, desperation creeping in. "Exactly. Nothing. Not even a place to sleep. Don't you understand?" "And what would I have if I stayed?" I wanted to ask. "A life tangled in debts, built on lies, with a man who saw me not as a partner, but as a financial fix." I slipped the engagement ring from my finger, the white gold still warm from my skin. He'd proposed in May by a fountain in the park, the water sparkling in the sunlight as I'd cried tears of joy. Now I knew those tears were for a lie I hadn't yet seen. I placed the ring on the white tablecloth, next to a bouquet of roses that had once symbolized our love. "This marriage will be annulled," I declared, my voice ringing clear and firm through the silent room. "Tomorrow." The ballroom seemed to hold its breath. The musicians, whispering in the corner, fell silent. Waiters froze, trays in hand. One of Roman's friends, the one who'd lent money for the restaurant, grabbed the microphone with a wry smile. "The groom's down for the count, but the cake's still here. Shall we move to dessert or call a lawyer?" Nervous laughter broke out, followed by scattered applause and a few whistles. More phones emerged, filming the scene that would soon flood the internet. Roman moved toward the exit, his steps slow and uncertain, like a man with no destination. At the door he turned, his eyes meeting mine one last time, filled with a strange resentment, as if I had betrayed him by refusing to be his savior. His mother started to follow, but paused at the threshold and returned to me. "I was a fool to put everything in his name," she said, her voice steady, devoid of self-pity. "But you're not. You're stronger than you realize, and you'll come through this." "Thank you for coming," I replied softly. "Thank you for telling me the truth." "I have nowhere to go," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But that's not your burden. I'll find my way." My father approached, his expression stern but tempered with compassion. "We'll help you find a place to stay," he told her. "Temporarily, until you sort things out, and we'll take this to court," he added, his gaze shifting to me. "He'll answer for the deception, the emotional toll, and every expense of this wedding. I nodded, but deep down, I knew it wasn't about the money. Money could be recovered. The time, trust, and dreams lost to his lies could not. Guests began to disperse, some approaching to offer a handshake or words of support, others slipping out quietly, unsure how to navigate the awkwardness. My friends surrounded me, forming a protective circle, suggesting we go to someone's house to talk, to drink, to process. But I craved solitude, a moment to breathe and reclaim myself. I took the microphone one final time, the weight of the day settling into my bones. "I'm sorry to everyone who came expecting a celebration and got a drama instead," I said, my voice carrying across the nearly empty room. The party didn't happen, but the truth did, and that's worth something, maybe more than I realized. The ballroom emptied slowly, leaving only my parents, two close friends, and my brother with his wife. Waiters moved quietly, clearing tables, their footsteps soft against the polished floor. The wedding cake stood untouched, its bride and groom figurines perched atop like a mockery of the day's promises. I approached it, carefully removing the groom figurine and wrapping it in a napkin. "For memory," I told my mother, who watched me with quiet concern, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. 6 months later, I founded my own consulting firm, specializing in due diligence, vetting the reliability of potential business partners before deals are made. The business flourished, a testament to the fact that many people, like me, want to know the truth before it's too late, not in the middle of a wedding reception. Roman tried to contact me several times, sending messages, calling, even showing up at my office with claims that he'd changed, that he'd learned from his mistakes and wanted to start over. I didn't respond. Some mistakes can't be undone. They can only serve as lessons to avoid repeating. The marriage was annulled within a month. Legally, I was never Roman's wife, as if the wedding had never existed, but to me it was real, the most pivotal moment of my life. It wasn't the wedding where I became a wife, it was the one where I walked away from illusions, stepping into a clearer, stronger version of myself. I keep the groom figurine in a drawer at my desk, taking it out occasionally to remind myself of the lesson it carries. In fairy tales, let there be a prince, but I'll no longer chase wolves disguised as saviors. True love doesn't need rescuing. It thrives on truth, and I'm determined to live by that